We have a bonus episode tonight with Sean O'Brien from the Calder Farmstead to talk a little bit more about the San Diego Gulls and about certain players that should be playing for Anaheim this season. We'll talk about that and more on tonight's bonus episode of Locked On Anaheim Ducks.
You're Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome everyone to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jason JD Hernandez, on this bonus episode. And we're going to have some Gulls talk. I talked a little bit about the Gulls on Gulls Thursday, but I have a very special guest who is part of a terrific podcast, might I add. It's the Calder Farmstead, and a lot of you familiar with Locked On Ducks know the current co-host of Calder Farmstead, who used to host Locked On Kings. And this is the main host of the Calder Farmstead, Sean O'Brien, from it looks like all the way out in San Diego.
Oh yeah. I'm a big traveler. Like to make sure I get out to fun places. Where the content is. Been hosting the Calder Farmstead for, almost 3 years now. It's really flown by. We've had to make some changes to the format this year out of necessity because, as it turns out, watching 12 games a weekend was not really a sustainable thing, and we've gone from the preview recap format to being a little bit more around the league, a little bit more balanced, but not necessarily talking about individual games or matchups. But still, last week we broke down Laval's defensive zone system and what's going on there. We talked about what Henderson's doing wrong and why they're struggling. We talk about San Diego. We basically randomly draw 8 teams out of a hat every week to talk about until the hat is empty, and then we fill it back up.
And one team we talked about recently, which I want to talk about just for a hot second, the Bakersfield Condors. And the reason for that is because the Condors recently had a game against the San Diego Gulls where they shut them out 2-0 on Veterans Day, by the way. Bakersfield has had a pretty solid defense all around. And, I've said this, I've noticed this. When they tend to shut it down, they shut it down big time. And they did so against that Gulls team just last Friday, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, they did. I actually just finished watching that game right before I came on here, so fresh in my mind. Bakersfield's always had a really good defense. They managed to keep kind of the same bodies around there. They have a couple that have kind of graduated or moved on, but the same core seems to be in place for most of the season. And they're a big physical defense that has guys like Yanni Caldas who can skate and move the puck well, but they have a lot of good balance on their blue line. I think that's been one of the big keys to their success. I thought the Gulls played at least well enough to be in that game. It was only 2-0, but they didn't feel like they were getting absolutely, their teeth kicked in. Whereas, what was the last game that they just played?
The
Santa
game on
Fe.
Wednesday?
Yeah. That one. That was
the Gulls had nothing on that game.
No, they looked like they never got off the bus on that one. But yeah, Bakersfield has, they've struggled a little bit in the early goings too. I don't think that they've gotten quite the goaltending that they were hoping for. I thought Calvin Pickard's been good, but Rodriguez been not exactly what you were hoping for. They've had some hiccups on offense too, where I think some of it is just bad luck as opposed to guys not executing. They've had a lot of roster shuffle too. If I remember this correctly, Tyler Benson, who we said on the show was going to get healthy, just got assigned for a conditioning stint down there. So he should be there for a couple games. That'll give them a nice boost. Because he probably doesn't belong in the AHL anymore. So they'll.
You're right on that.
Yeah, they'll at least get some pieces back, which will be helpful too.
Yeah, and going back to that game, you're right that it felt like the Gulls were in it. It was 0-0 for the longest time. And those 2 goals came within striking distance. That second goal, the Gulls defense was really scattered around. There was 3 guys on one side and no guys on the other side. So that's probably a residue of just bad scattered defense all around.
And you've seen that a lot from the Gulls in recent games where they still don't look like they have understood where they're supposed to be outside of, I would say, the top line, that like Kirkland Grew Grimaldi line,
Yeah.
that one seems to have figured it out. Of like they've kind of gelled and have the chemistry going now. They're defensively not always the best, but they're at least usually in the right place. Whereas a lot of their other lines look very scattered. And I mean, I don't think anyone's really ever going to accuse Jacob Perreault of being a defensive wonderkin, but like him, Braden Tracy, who like at least Tracy puts in a lot of like effort, but it's not
Hmm.
always well placed. But yeah, there were a lot of moments in recent games where it's not been pretty in their own end. And that the San Jose game especially too, that was just a failure in transition. Like I felt like I was
Yeah, that
watching
was
last year's Barracuda team, and then I realized, and I'm like, oh no, this makes a little bit of sense.
that's a little harsh, but it's very apt criticism on that end. So I want to talk about the forwards a little bit, and you have a website, by the way, that shows some of the forwards in the league, and I wanted to mention this on the podcast itself. I love the use of the old school graphics on some of your graphs. I
Oh
like
yeah.
the old school Providence Reds logo in there just because I like that one. Old school Gulls logo. I think Gulls fans of old will love that one. But going through the forwards, there is one name in there that I think probably should have been given a shot with the Anaheim Ducks, and that's Rocco Grimaldi. And if you want to touch on Grimaldi's game for a hot second.
Oh, absolutely. Grimaldi he's been a little hot and cold in the early goings where you would see him just take over a game and then be, I would say, absent, but not as present in some of the others. But it looks like he's kind of started to settle in and find his place, his pace, his chemistry. But I mean, Grimaldi, you still see all of the things that say he's an NHL player. I mean, he has at least NHL caliber speed. I wouldn't call him, the next Connor McDavid or Andreas Athanasiou speed, but like he can skate at a high level in the AHL. He definitely has at least NHL level speed. But he has high end puck skills, great hockey IQ. He's an above average shooter. And I mean, he's still a dude who put in what, back to back seasons of 10 goals in the NHL. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
that's not something you're raising a banner for, but like, that's not
you are if
nothing.
you're
Like,
you are if you're the Nashville Predators.
well, it makes sense. It was in Nashville, so maybe they did.
Yeah.
But it's one of those where it's like you don't have guys who score double digit goals in multiple years in the NHL just suddenly play seasons in the AHL following up. And yeah, every time I've seen him play, he's still looked like a guy who has skills that don't belong here. And I think that he should have been given a shot with Anaheim, but also I think Anaheim is doing some general Patton kind of strategy and just not necessarily trying to do their best every night, which, hey, I mean, if you see the hype around the draft class for 2023, I feel like that's okay. If they get Connor Bedard or Adam Fantilli 5 years from now, no one will remember that they were horrifically bad for 2 years. They're just going to remember Connor Bedard and like some Jack Daniels or something.
This is kind of reminiscent of the Colorado Avalanche from 5, 6 years ago. No one or hardly anyone remembers those down years for the Avs now that they just won a Stanley Cup last season.
Yeah.
And
Like
that's how.
no one remember like my fandom is kind of strange, but in the NHL level, I'm a Penguins fan. And nobody remembers those like first three Crosby years before Malkin came, when like those teams were fun because it had young Crosby doing everything he could to get the puck in the net, but they were not good. And nobody really remembers those years. That like those are forgotten years. And as long as they don't become, a long trend, if it's, 2 or 3 down years, 1 or 2 down years, everyone's like, oh yeah, we can move on from that. Like as long as you don't do what the Sabres did and you're on rebuild version 3.4, like that's people will forget and they'll come back. Or like what I mean, the Senators now at least are trending upwards. It supposedly, allegedly, but then you have other teams where it's like you need to start. Like I think the Penguins should sell at this deadline, but the
Well, we thought the same thing of the Ducks season. They trended up until the All-Star break, and then they just completely fell apart at the end of last season.
yeah, it's all John Hamm's fault. That's what I'm.
Maybe you got something there.
But I think eventually, especially now that Lucas Dostal has looked like the goalie we thought he could be. Granted,
Mm-hmm.
I do my very best to not try and draw firm conclusions from what a 5-game sample, a 7-game sample, like.
Yeah.
But he's been building to this for a while, so I'm more inclined to believe that this is legitimate, especially because most of the defense has not been doing him favors in his own ends.
Oh yeah, that's
But
a good segue. That's a really good segue, and I do want to talk about the defense and Dostal, but I'm looking on the clock on the upper right that I've got to do a little break here. So if you want to hang tight for a second, I got
no
to talk
worries.
about I got to talk about Bet Online, which is the one place that has you covered, the one place that we trust. Bet Online has you covered with more props, odds, lines, etc., etc. The NBA is going on right now. NHL, you could bet on teams, but be responsible. Don't bet on the Ducks. And you could also bet on football. Baseball's dead to us. And there's also MMA, boxing, etc., etc. So if you want to check out the latest lines, you could do so at betonline.net using either your laptop or your mobile device. BetOnline is the official online sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network, and please gamble responsibly and don't bet on the Ducks, don't bet on the Blue Jackets. Be responsible, folks. And if you live in California, oh well. That's all I'm going to say about that. So you segued talking about Lukasz Dostal, who is the current, by the way, AHL Player of the Week. In those 3 games, he went 2-1. Looked stellar in those 3 games, by the way, including the game against Bakersfield. That second goal was not his fault.
No.
That was just horrific defense. You have one defenseman on your graph that's actually doing something fairly well on the offensive end, and that is someone that John Broadman calls the honey badger, Nicholas Brouillard. It's a long story there. But talk about the honey badger for a quick second.
I mean, in his own end, he's probably their 3rd best defenseman on defense, which is not saying a whole ton, but he's at least out there not screwing it up on a regular basis. His big value to them is moving the puck in transition and what he can do quarterbacking a power play in the offensive zone, joining the rush. He does all of those very, very well. And it's why kind of you saw him play forward a bunch last year, because he basically plays defense like a forward would.
Yeah, I'll chime in here. I'll chime in. The same happened with Hunter Drew, converted defenseman into a forward. Same thing.
Oh, for sure. So it'll be interesting to see, and I think this was part of our season preview for the Gulls too, is if the team tries to put him back in some forward roles, and I'm like, I kind of doubt that, just because that very much does not seem like a Roy Sommer move. But it could happen. But I think his biggest value is definitely getting the puck from their end through the neutral zone into the offensive zone. He's very good on the power play, although I feel like he gets a little shooty at times from distance. But he's definitely their really only good playmaker from the back end. Their only good puck mover from the back end. As much as I love Drew Hellison's play this year in the defensive zone, when the puck is on his stick and he's asked to do things with it, I mean, it's fine. He's not terrible at it, but like the rest of the Gulls defense, the game against San Jose was one in which you just saw transition mistake after transition mistake after failure after failure. And it's like, yeah, they didn't get to play much offense because they literally could not leave the zone with possession.
There it is, right there. I feel like a broken record saying that too. That's been an issue for the Gulls for a lot of this season. And it comes on those third line pairings. It comes from guys like Axel Anderson, who's had trouble with that. It's come from guys like Josh Healy.
Oh, Josh.
And oh boy. I think the less we talk about that, the better.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just struggled. Unfortunately, he has struggled this season mightily. But there's one name that you did mention that I've liked a lot this season, Drew Hellison. And you've mentioned before we started, you like Drew Hellison on the defensive end.
Oh, for sure. Hellison reminds me if Axel Anderson was like a little bit better. They have kind of an overlapping skill set, except I think Hellison does a better job of it. Hellison's a little more physical, a little more mobile. He's willing to jump into the play a little bit more, but and he's more useful in transition. But like
Yep.
he still plays, he is the rich man's Axel Anderson. But I've really liked what I've seen from him this year. He's done a good job breaking up plays in his own end. He's not getting lost in coverage. Even when you have teams like Ontario who use a lot of movement in the offensive zone and cycling and activate Ds from the blue line and bring them down into the play, he's still able to process all of that, kind of multi-variable problem at a high speed, which is impressive. The problem with Drew Hellison and the area that's going to kind of keep him in, if he does make it to Anaheim or while he's with Anaheim, that's going to keep him in basically bottom pair penalty kill minute role is what he does with the puck on his stick. He's not making mistakes often when he's, making breakout passes or in the offensive zone, but he's not adding value to pucks. And that's going to limit your upside as a defenseman in, this day and age in the NHL. Like you can be someone who defends the net front well, defends the rush well, can break up plays, block shots, but you need to be able to get pucks out of your own end and start it up the ice. Like the best defense in the NHL is still, your traditional defense, but second best defense is getting the puck out of your end. Most teams that are bad at every level, you can point to transition as being one of the reasons why, because if you can't get pucks out of your own end, making offense is nearly impossible. We saw that again, not to beat a dead horse here already, but in that Barracuda game, like nobody came to play when it came to getting pucks out of their end. They just kept turning it over.
And I'll go one further. Even in the NHL level, last night's game against the Winnipeg Jets, the Ducks had issues getting the puck out of their own zone. They called Drew Hellison up for this road trip, but they didn't use him last night. And I thought having someone of his caliber to get pucks out of the zone was one of the biggest issues for the Ducks last night and was ultimately their undoing when they allowed that late goal against Kyle Connor for the hat trick. The Ducks just could not get the puck out of their zone, and that was just a broken record all throughout the season for the Ducks, and especially in last night's game. So when you mentioned that aspect of his game, that'd be useful for the Ducks, wouldn't it?
It would, assuming that it translates 1-to-1 from AHL to NHL, which is not a given. It wouldn't surprise me to see them kind of ease him in because he's not, your typical grizzled 28-year-old veteran who you'd want for, just a cup of coffee. Like they're going to probably take it easy with him because, throwing him into the deep end and asking him to do stuff that he's never done at the NHL level is a big ask from 22, 23-year-old who's 22. Doesn't have a lot of pro experience per se. So I can understand why they aren't willing to throw him in. They want him to get some practices in, get his feet wet a little bit, feel comfortable where he is before they decide they want to throw him into game action, which I think is understandable. He's also on, I think, an emergency loan too, which, if I remember correctly, the rules behind that, as soon as someone else is declared like physically healthy enough to play, he gets sent back to San Diego, and there's no waivers to it or anything like that. So we may not see him in action depending on how severe injuries are to the Ducks defensive core. I'm not up to speed with that one at the moment, but he's someone who I think they're probably going to play very lightly. Like it wouldn't shock me to see if the first game he gets in Anaheim in this swing is like 12 minutes or something silly like that, just to, get him out there, get him used to the speed of the game.
Well, I'll give you one. I'll give you a big one. The Ducks defensive core right now is without Jamie Drysdale because he is out for the season. Dmitry Kulikov is their top defenseman. Remember Simon Benoit from the Gulls. He's in the second line. Colton White and former Ontario Reign player Austin Strand is in their third line defense. That's a little thin.
They had a big offseason signing. They paid like $7 million.
Oh, John Klingberg. John Klingberg. He's not in the first line. He's got one goal this season.
Oof.
In 17 games. Oof is right.
Yeah.
It's not at all. He'll be moved at the off season or at the midseason.
Oh,
trade deadline.
He signed that contract with the firm intention of being moved at the deadline.
Yeah, the stupid thing about that contract is it's a no trade clause until a certain date in that contract. I think it's like mid-February is when he could finally get moved.
I'm surprised he
Okay.
didn't do full no move with like a 10 team or 5 team list or whatever. So that way he knows he's getting traded and he can control the destination as opposed to, letting Anaheim do it.
Yeah, that was weird to me too. I mean, it was a weird contract to begin with, but he also kind of bet on himself as well.
Yeah, the Taylor Hall
That,
deal. That's
yeah, we'll see how that works. We're going to end today with a little bit of brevity here because we've talked about the defense. We talked about actually we didn't talk about Dostal a whole lot
we can
yet.
circle back to that one. Yeah.
You said that Dostal, it hasn't been all his fault, and he has been a quality goaltender in this league. Do you think he might be ready for the NHL as a backup soon?
Yes, and I think he's probably ready for a backup role as early as later in this year. As long as we continue to see the progress that he's made this season in San Diego. I mean, and he's always going to struggle, I think, to put up stellar AHL numbers just because the team in front of him defensively has not been good so far. And well, yeah, we can all cross our fingers and hope that that improves. I think taking his stats with a dose of salt, and maybe a shot of tequila and a lime with it is helpful. That's kind of why the graph that we have on our page for goaltenders also shows defensive environment at the bottom,
Yep.
and that kind of helps put like it's not just raw save percentage. It helps put that number into context of like, yeah, are you having mild success, but how hard is it to be you? And I think that's something that kind of takes the, people who just look at the box score stats and see that, Dostal has a 912 or 915 or whatever in February. Like he's not ready for the NHL. He can't even put up a 925 at the A. Like that's not, well, his team in front of him makes mistakes that NHL defensemen don't make. So
Mm-hmm.
there is that aspect to it. And I think he could be ready for, that NHL backup role in short order, especially too, like if he continues to succeed in the AHL and look ready, you could see, that was, I think, the big reason that you didn't see John Gibson get traded at the deadline
Yep.
last season is that they're like, well, we don't know if Dostal's ready yet. And if he's not ready, we can't just be throwing, our quasi franchise goaltender away for futures if we don't have a goalie of the future ready to come in and seize the throne. And Dostal has at least looked that part for the first, handful of games this year he's played in, which I take more stock in than I normally would for players who play that kind of sample because he's been building towards this. I actually picked the Gulls to beat the Reign last year in the playoffs strictly on the basis of I trusted Lucas Dostal to be able to steal the show, and I trusted Matthew Villalta to be able to give it away. And there was like 10 minutes in the first period of game one where I looked brilliant. It was like the Gulls came out to like a 2-0 lead. And for like 10 minutes, I'm like, look at me. I'm the smartest guy on the internet. And then it all backfired.
I mean, watching that game live, I could see the writing on the wall that Ontario was kind of hanging back, but they were also trying to rely too much on certain guys that are no longer there right now. And they kind of succeeded with that. Remember, they had that power play that relied on Martin Firk all of the season. They did get burned. We also saw, interestingly enough, we saw the NHL debut. Well, I had a couple of debuts for the Gulls on those games who only played, I believe, just the one game, and that was it. And I think that was Hellison. Oh no, that was Olin Zellweger.
Zellweger, yeah.
Olin Zellweger, yeah, Zellweger played game one and mysteriously was left out of game two, which to this day still makes me go, why? Olin played a good game one. Defensively, he was fine. That wasn't all his fault. And to your point, going to the Reign, I don't even trust Matt Villalta all that much this season. I think Phoenix Copley's been the better of the two goaltenders in Ontario this season.
I think it's been hard to say because it's funny. I said this. We talked about the Reign on our last episode, and I said this to Sarah. I was like, if you would have told Reign fans that Matthew Villalta, 12 games into the season, had a 931 save percentage, they'd be like, oh, so we're 12-0 and atop the Pacific Division. Like that's always been what seems like it's held them back is that there are times in which Matthew Villalta just cannot stop pucks. And he's had three just amazing games and then two just atrocious ones. So it's a small sample and it's hard to know what's going on. Like this is a moment in his career that he should be developing and getting better. But at the same point, I said that last season, and he was still just he relies too much on his athleticism to make saves, and he's been slowly building structure in there bit by bit. Probably, his goalie coach is bald from pulling his hair out, but like it's been a struggle for him. But I think I also not that high on Phoenix Copley either. He's clearly on the back nine of his career, and the fact that he's
Yep.
been as solid as he has, I feel like is more of a good fortune than it is good ability. I like Copley's still a serviceable AHL goaltender, but like even his last season or so in Hershey, the fans there were like still treating Phoenix Copley like he was a top starter in the AHL and should be getting looks as a backup in the NHL. And it's like that's just not true.
Yeah,
He's
I
been
think
serviceable to slightly below average AHL goaltender for about 3 seasons now. He was better last year, but I still am not convinced that he's the guy that his save percentage indicates he is. And I'm still mixed on what Villalta is going to be this year. I think he probably takes steps forward, but I don't think he does the thing that gets the Kings excited.
And I think that's why I was surprised in last year's mini playoff that it was a 2-game sweep. I honestly thought it would go 3 games because of what you just said about Villalta not being that steady goaltender, and especially considering Dostal on the other side. Dostal was brilliant in that second game. It was a close battle all throughout. It took an overtime goal for the Reign to move on. When I thought San Diego was going to pull that one out in game 2. I really did. It felt like it was trending that direction.
I feel like even though I was wrong in my pick for that series, the reasons that I made that choice were at least evident. It just didn't work out. And that's,
Yeah.
the nature of hockey. The best team doesn't always win. The right team doesn't always win. And I mean, Ontario, I still said, I know Ontario is the better team, but goaltending counts for so much in, a 2-game, 3-game series. And I think Dostal is ready to be put on a big stage and, have a little bit of a coming out party. And yeah, he didn't do it then, but he's now doing it, which actually makes me more angry when I think about it. But like, he's
You know what? I thought yes, to this day I still think his coming out party was 2 playoffs ago, the weird little Pacific Division playoff between San Diego and Bakersfield, when Dostal had like a 40-something save game at Mechanics Bank Arena. That I thought was his coming out party at that time.
I mean, I struggle to take things from that season in totality with seriousness, just because of
Yeah.
how, especially in that playoff. Like, I forget who it was off the top of my head, but people were like, "Yeah, these are just intense as regular players." I'm like, "Are you watching the same games that I am?" Like, these are like exhibition friendlies because literally none of them want to still be there. Like, they're not getting paid at that point.
Yep.
And I think what was it? Marc-Andre Fleury's agent, Alan Walsh, like tweeted out something that like 75% of the players or whatever it was voted against having any kind of playoff. And the teams were like, yeah, but we actually don't care. So you're going to do it anyway. So like, I think, yeah, like Dostal played really well in that playoff little mini series, but like, it's hard to take the level of effort that was clearly on the ice on both sides seriously in front of him. Like, he was out there trying his best, but like that is 100% not true of everyone else in that game.
He was the only one out there really, really going balls out in that series. No,
like,
no discredit to everyone else though.
Oh yeah, like I still remember watching the Henderson Bakersfield final and being like, I've literally watched a deciding playoff game and there hasn't been one scrum after a whistle. There's been like physicality, but nobody's, there's been no sign that like these teams are anything more than like, let's just do this and get out of here. Like, it was like Bakersfield was happy at what they won at the end, but like they clocked in at a very much 7.5 out of 10 on the happiness scale. You win a real Calder Cup playoff series, you are at least an 8.5, 9. That's that whole season, like we saw so many mirages from that season where it's like, oh yeah, this guy from Lehigh Valley put in, near a point per game place. And then the next season it's like, oh yeah, he scored 10 points in 49 games. And it's like, yeah, that 2021 season wasn't real.
I mean, it was real enough that I had to be in a bubble, but that's a whole other podcast altogether.
Yeah.
In general. And next time I go to Bakersfield, I'll make sure to get a picture of the division banner that they have hanging up.
Oh God,
Not,
that's
I'm not kidding. I will take a picture next time I'm in Bakersfield. I think next month I'm going up there. They have a banner that says 2021 Pacific Division Champions. I kid you not.
I.
It's too stupid to make up.
Oh, it definitely is. That's. I mean, okay, Bakersfield's
Yep.
sure,
Yep.
whatever.
Yeah. Fine. Um, we're gonna end on a lighter note. So you can see I have a little AHL jersey. If you remember that jersey from the 2020 All Star game, that was the last All Star game we've had for the American
Yeah.
Hockey League, just down the road from me in Ontario. So we're gonna have like a little bit of fun here. I know you're a big jersey head. You got the Gulls jersey on right now,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm also a big jersey head. So I will ask you, like, in your memory, what are three of the best Gulls specialty jerseys they've worn?
Oh, I mean, I
Because I
love
have,
the retro one that they have. That's like the blue and orange that just has the gulls over it. I honestly wish they would just put this logo on that jersey and that would be it. Like that should be the home logo. I've said that for I think at least 6 months now. Like as soon as I saw those, I'm like, all right, I understand the history and that kind of stuff, but like just modernize that with the logo you have now. Call it a day. Like that's what they should do. Specialty Gulls jerseys. Oh, for military jerseys that they had the other night when Dostal made Save of the Year, I didn't mind those. Like most military jerseys, I feel like because every year every team does one,
Mhm.
and like there are only so many so many designs that you can keep doing year after year. So most teams kind of do the same ish things every year. I kind of liked theirs with the desert camo look. That one was one of the
Yep.
better, at least one of the more interesting ones that I saw. Whereas most of them, I feel like, have been very much done before and done better. Trying to think. Specialty jerseys for the Gulls.
That one is on my list, by the way. The camo one.
Yeah, I liked that camo one. I liked their Pink in the Rink one that they did. I'm not sure what year it's from, but they did where it's like white, but they did the pink shoulders and stuff. I really
Yeah.
liked that one. Like most of the pink or the purple jerseys, like cancer awareness, great cause, obviously. But the jerseys for them often look not great. Like I'm amazed that people buy them. I think they do it out of more of a sense of like helping the cause than like I really want to have this jersey and wear around town, which that's fair. But the Gulls ones that they did for Pink in the Rink, like breast cancer awareness, I thought were pretty good compared to the rest of the field doing them. I thought theirs were at least one that I would contemplate buying.
I I agree on that. I mean, they had that jersey online, and I had to look for like all the jerseys on their team shop, and I believe it's the one from last season actually. The white one with the pink on it. That one's a really nice one, but they've always had really good pink in the rink jerseys. San Diego just does a good job with those.
Oh, for sure.
My favorite one by far. Do you remember 80s night? The 80s night jerseys.
No, I don't.
Oh, look that up right now as I'm talking about this. So the San Diego Gulls, 2 years ago or 3 years ago, had an 80s night where they did everything 80s. They brought the DeLorean in. They brought all the special, like, just 80s stuff. They had, like, Rubik's Cube people there. The jersey itself had Rubik's Cube shoulder pads with this kind of, like, 80s-ified logo. The numbers themselves had a little bit of a colored, like, gradient. To me, that was probably my favorite Gulls specialty jersey they've ever done. But I think what made that night special, they changed their goal song to an 80s song. They didn't deviate. Some teams do specialty nights and they play a few songs, like they'll have a country night to play a few country songs, or they'll have like a rock and roll night and play a few rock and roll songs. Gulls went all out. Every single song, including their intro songs, like everything from the 80s, they went all out on that one.
I think I'm seeing it here. Oh, I do see it with the Rubik's Cube. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very like I like it, but it feels almost like it was supposed to be their Miami Vice night jerseys, which, to be fair, is 80s. So that's acceptable. But yeah, those are definitely very 80s. Like I can see the like spandex with those.
Yeah, those were sweet.
Those
Every
are good ones.
every time I see a fan with those jerseys, I just smile a little bit more. And in hindsight, I wish I'd got one because they're nice.
Oh, I'm sure that like that's the one thing that always makes me laugh when I see like the post game jersey auctions and stuff. And it's like I have the most I've ever paid for a jersey, and I have 96, 97 in my
Whew.
collection. The most I've ever paid is I think 249, and it was for one that was very very rare. That I'm like, I know I'm never gonna get another shot at this, so like I have to fork up the cash for it. And it was a Laney McDonald Calgary Flames jersey. So
Ooh, that's a good one.
yeah, like you're not going to come across that on eBay or on like Facebook Marketplace or something like that. So that was one where I'm like, I've resigned to the fact that I'm never going to find this in the wild. So I'm willing to fork out the actual cash for it. But like most of the time, I pay, between, let's say, like less than 180 for each jersey. Like I have incredible patience for, eBay and Facebook Marketplace and stuff like that. So like the idea that people are paying like $1,200 for some, fourth line guy's jersey, I never can get my head around. Like,
Which is partially why I like what the Gulls do. The Gulls set aside a bunch of jerseys, the blank ones, for their specialty nights and actually put them up for sale at about 200 pop, which is more than some other teams that say you can only get this jersey if you buy it from this player and whatnot. I like having the option of getting just the jersey itself for a lot cheaper.
yeah, I think that's one thing that has been I've made fun of on Twitter about the AHL, where like there are certain parts of their merchandise shops where like a comparable piece of merchandise to their NHL club is actually more expensive at the AHL level, and it's like, you guys know that doesn't make sense, right? Like,
Oh,
I think the
totally.
example I used was Wilkes-Barre Scranton had a like kids Penguins jersey that was blank, and it was, I want to say
Oh,
like $100. And the Penguins sold a Crosby kids blank jersey with the name and number on the back for like 79. And it was like, guys, your blank kids jersey is 20% more expensive than the Pittsburgh Penguins Crosby one. Like, you were doing it wrong. But like, especially too, if you have a fan base that's, is coming to your games because they like the price point of, $25 tickets and $6 beer, you can't be trying to get them to do $320 for a jersey. Like, that's,
yeah. Or Taco Tuesday, but
yeah. But like the other thing too is selling merchandise like that. That's, you want people to buy your stuff, because then when they wear it, that's advertising you didn't pay for. That's advertising they
mhm.
paid you to do. Like, you can't be charging them arm and leg for that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
I know. In hindsight, I wish I got that 80s one. That's kind of the one that got away, but that one sold out so fast
I
that I
think
didn't
I've
have much of a
seen one on
chance.
eBay, like here and there. So
I saw one on eBay. It went for a lot,
I
like
think, I don't
a
know.
lot.
I got a Gulls jersey. I got my Gulls jersey already, so I took that off my eBay alert list. So, but
There you go. For those that want to follow your work and follow the website, where can they find you and where can they find your wonderful podcast?
so my podcast is the Calder Farmstead. You can find us at the Calder Farmstead on Facebook and Instagram, and at Calder Farmstead on Twitter for however much longer Twitter lasts. We are basically, we record Wednesday nights, and it comes out Thursday morning. And we talk about news that's going on around the league when there is some, and then we just kind of pull 8 teams out of a hat and deep dive them, talk about what's going on with them, if they're winning, why they're winning, if they're losing, why they're losing, if their star player is hot or cold, what's going on there. So we touch on all 32 teams across the league, 10 minutes or so at a time. Those come out Thursday. You can find us there if you go to our Linktree page, linktr.ee/the Calder Farmstead. That's where you can find everything about us. Me personally, you can find me on Twitter at Sean O'Brien81. That's SeanObrien81. I'm also on Instagram at Sean O'Brien _81. My Twitter is mostly hockey, but is, a mixed bag of stuff. I'm not a beat reporter, so I don't take it that seriously and try and be super professional all the time, which has its pros and cons. My Instagram is not that well updated, but you can see my entire jersey collection on it in my jersey of the day story that I have saved, as well as, my dog Parker, who makes frequent appearances on it as well. But that's all the places you can find us.
Yep. And we got to mention your AHL charts, by the way. We got to mention that
Oh,
on the
yes,
tableau.
of course. I just finally finished them because it's really hard to edit, 4,500 lines of code when like there's one piece that isn't working. So it took me a lot longer this season because I tried to do something different with how I put shots in because I cut out overtime and shootout shots from my totals. And it took a long time to get that right. But you can find all of that at bit.ly/data dump and chase. It's also in our Linktree page for the Calder Farms if you scroll all the way down there. So, and that'll show you charts on, how players, forwards, defensemen, goaltenders are performing, how teams are performing at even strength. It projects standings as well as looks at standings over time. As you know that two players get called up to your NHL club and that changes everything. We can actually help project how much that shifts things and how bad your team is now going forward. So we do all of that. We have playoff chances up there because now I've built it out so that every single AHL game is simulated 5,000 times, and we can see who makes the playoffs or who's likely to make the playoffs. That was a lot of fun last year, but a very time-consuming thing to build. But you can find all of that on my Tableau page. They now have changed the order on Tableau for how things are displayed. It used to be the most recent stuff at the top. Now it's at the bottom, which I don't like. But if you scroll all the way to the bottom down there, you'll see the AHL 22-23 charts, and you can have fun exploring those. As always, if you have any questions about them, you can find me on Twitter and ask. We have an episode 0 from the Calder Farms that should explain most of it, but not always. So I'm always happy to explain, talk about analytics and things like that.
San Diego right now a 51% chance to make the playoffs. Hey, better than Henderson.
Yeah, Henderson is. I have to believe at some point they are going to get it together. Like
I don't know.
I've thought highly of that coaching staff. They have good pieces on the team. Their big problem is they just cannot execute in transition, which the Gulls should be able to understand a little bit. But they're so sloppy right now, and I have to imagine at some point that course corrects. But they look like Binghamton in the bubble bad at transition. I don't know if you remember any of those. Binghamton.
Yes.
Binghamton, if you breathed heavily on them on the forecheck, they turn the puck over. So Henderson isn't quite that bad, but they're very much in that ballpark.
Binghamton was historically bad, almost. That's how bad it was.
Yeah.
But anyway, Sean, thanks for coming on. Really, really appreciate you coming on. And I'm just going to end the show right here. Don't forget, you can follow me on Twitter at StimpyJD, if Twitter's still alive. And the show's Twitter is at LO_Ducks, if that's still alive. And yeah, I promise I will put more drink. I'm kidding. We're not supposed to have drinking videos, but my last one, a little throwback of how bad the Ducks are doing right now. It's awful. And if you listen to the podcast, it's available everywhere like Stitcher, Spotify, etc., etc. Last episode talked about the 17-game streak the Ducks are on, where they have not won a regulation game. They're coming close to the Phoenix Coyotes. I say that derisively, but they're coming close. Almost at 20. Tank for Bedard. That's what I'm saying. Sean, thanks so much again.
Anytime.
Really appreciate it. And on behalf of Sean and myself, I'm Jason Hernandez saying have a great weekend, folks. Please continue to be safe out there. And Ducks and Gulls fly together.